I'm Lily Nichols. Hello, Lily. You can tell it's early here. Lily has reviewed 934 studies for her newly released book, Real Food for Pregnancy, and I absolutely love this book. It's an incredible evidence-based study that Lily has pretty much cited. You've just gone into so much detail in here, and I just find it's just so thorough and so important. I recommend it to all of my pregnant clients. And pretty much the approach is about not only your evidence-based study, but also mindful eating. And I love that it's also paired with a little bit of cultural history about food as well, and just basically all the essential nutrients that are needed necessary fetal development. So I've got a lot of questions for you, and we'll try and get through as many as possible. So thank you for taking the time to have a chat to me today.
You bet.
So first question is, what did you actually have for breakfast?
Kind of my typical. I usually have a couple eggs. Today I made some bacon and had some beet greens that were left over from some beets I got at the farmer's market. So just sauteed that up right after I made the eggs, and then my usual tea. I always have tea with some heavy whipping cream in it. So yeah.
Awesome. And eggs, on that topic of eggs, because I know you mentioned eggs quite a bit in here as like a superfood for pregnancy. So can you go into a bit more detail about why eggs are so fantastic?
Yes. So many reasons. Probably the number one reason is that they are a very rich source of a nutrient called choline, which is a B vitamin-like compound, but it was discovered after they had already named the B vitamins. So we don't have like a vitamin B number name for it. It's just choline. But it is vital for fetal brain development and vision development. And new research is showing that we need quite a bit more than what our current recommendations are. So it's kind of a tricky nutrient to find in our diet. The two major sources are eggs and liver, and not many people eat much liver these days. So it really leaves eggs, and it's in other places, but just in concentrations like 1/5 of the concentration you find in egg yolks.
And there's so many women who are a little bit paranoid around eggs during pregnancy due to the runny yolks. So what are your thoughts on, should the yolks be fully hard, or is it all right to have slightly runny yolks during pregnancy?
Yeah, so I looked at all the data on, food safety advice. There's so many foods to avoid. I feel like so many women, they come into pregnancy and their first question is, what can't I eat, instead of what can I eat, or what should I eat more of? So the eggs with runny yolks issue, the reason that it's conventionally prohibited is that eggs can contain salmonella, and that could make you sick, and you are more susceptible to food poisoning during pregnancy. However, the chances that an egg contains salmonella are really, really low. It's like 1 in 12,000 to 1 in 30,000. So very, very unlikely you'd come across it during your pregnancy. And then furthermore, the way that the chickens are raised can influence the chances that salmonella is kicking around in the farm and contaminates the eggs. So chances of salmonella infection in organic farms is 7-fold lower than that. So I haven't worked out the math on exactly how many eggs that is, but it's very, 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 very rare, especially if you're getting really good quality eggs. So if the only way you like eggs is with runny yolks, I would say the nutritional trade-off of not having eggs for the sake of food safety is actually not in your favor, and just to go for it. If you like eggs in other ways, then, and that feels safer to you, opt for that. I personally ate eggs with runny yolks. I like them over easy. So I ate them the whole way through my pregnancy and everything was fine. But you do what you're comfortable with.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's great advice. Regarding conventional nutrition, I know you go into that in quite a detail in your book, but could you just summarize basically what you think, our conventional nutritional guidelines get wrong? That's, when we're specifically talking about nutrients required for pregnancy?
Yeah. So there are a number of things, and part of the reason for this is that it takes an average of 17 years for research to make it into practice. And then I would anticipate even longer for it to be changed in actual guidelines. So a lot of our guidelines just simply aren't as up to date as they could be. So for example, as of 2015, they did the first ever study in pregnant women to directly measure protein needs. And they found that our protein needs are actually much higher than what our conventional estimates are. In fact, in late pregnancy, it's like 73% higher than our current guidelines. So protein needs, one example, that's off. And we didn't know how far it was off until 2015. I mean, that's 3 years ago. Choline needs could be higher. The studies show that they could be double what our current recommended intakes are, and that optimizes memory and brain function and neurodevelopment in infants. It also reduces the chances of preeclampsia. So that's something that probably will need to be amended at some point. I think our carbohydrate intake recommended in the conventional nutrition world is way too high, 45 to 65% of calories. And since a lot of my work has been with gestational diabetes or women who have high blood sugar during pregnancy, we've certainly seen much better outcomes when women eat a lower carb diet compared to those guidelines. So I think those will eventually be changed. I think all the fear surrounding fat intake will eventually be changed. If you get really, really strict on fat intake, you are automatically excluding a lot of really nutrient-dense foods. So eventually that'll change, I hope.
What about the whole focus on, I still find a lot of women focus on they should be having a certain amount of calories, during and after pregnancy. Do you think that focus will shift?
I would hope so. We will see. It's so funny because when you're trying to come up with guidelines, at a certain point, you do end up having to look at numbers to get a count of where you're at. So I don't know that they need to be, taken out from the guidelines necessarily, but I think from like a counseling perspective and what women do during their pregnancy, I don't think it's very advantageous to be counting calories. I really think the focus more on moving towards mindful eating, your body sort of naturally, I talked about the protein thing. I'll give you an example. So they've actually found that pregnant women tend to eat the right amount of protein. They tend to eat that 73% higher amount of protein during pregnancy, even though the guidelines are much different, right? So there's a lot of wisdom that our bodies have about how food is interacting with us, how well we're meeting our nutrient needs. And I think shifting the focus to building more confidence around trusting your hunger and satiety cues via mindful eating is ultimately a better way than getting hyper-focused about counting everything. You know what I mean?
So do you think tricky. Your body, when you're craving things during pregnancy, like I craved a lot of citrus, do you think that's a way of your body telling you need those nutrients? Is it?
In some instances, I do think it can be. Yeah. So food cravings and aversions are just so fascinating during pregnancy, what things your body wants or doesn't want. Citrus is quite common. Maybe that's a vitamin C issue, maybe not. I don't know. There's a lot of connective tissue and other things that are being developed or stretched or growing in your own body as well during pregnancy, and the formation of collagen requires vitamin C. So, that's conceivable. A lot of women crave salty foods during pregnancy. That also seems to maybe have a physiologic basis because salt needs increase during pregnancy, even though that's another thing that should change on the guidelines. No restriction on salt. Pregnant women need more.
Oh, that's good too. Because I know a lot get quite worried when they're craving the salt because they're feeling nauseous. So, it's like, should I actually be eating this much salty food? I go into all that in the book. So I have like a whole big section on pregnancy cravings and aversions and the possible reasons they could be coming up. One of which is maybe there's a nutritional need for more of it. It could be, many other things. And there's also a long section on salt needs in pregnancy. I mean, the conventional guidelines are kind of conservative on salt because there's still this idea that it could raise blood pressure, even though it's kind of been disproven for the general public, but specifically during pregnancy, there's actually been quite a bit of research showing that salt needs increase.
And having additional salt is actually important for the prevention of your blood pressure from going up.
Wow.
They found that it actually helps prevent preeclampsia, or in women with preeclampsia, having additional salt actually helps to lower the blood pressure in many cases. So it's completely opposite of what we've all been told, ironically.
Yeah, it is. It's fascinating. That's just why I love this book so much. And then just the fact that it's evidence-based, it just makes sense when you think about it logically, you know, if you have been pregnant as well. What your body is wanting and needing.
Exactly.
I always recommend, you know, a lot of my pregnant clients eat more protein, and immediate change in them, you know, their energy levels, their moods, everything. So it's
especially in the morning, particularly. I mean, pregnancy and outside of pregnancy, that's like the one piece of advice that seems so universally helpful for people is like, try to get some protein in the morning, and just that one little shift like changes cravings for the rest of the day. I've had some people like it completely eliminates their headaches that they used to get. It's just all sorts of things are improved when you get enough protein.
And I think it's also so important. It also sets them up so well to continue that way of eating post-pregnancy. Which, you know, is a whole nother conversation, but, you know,
a whole nother conversation
foundation, and then those energy levels and your milk supply and all of that, which just and the
crazy hunger and increased nutrient needs postpartum. You definitely need foods that are satiating, not just things that digest and spike your blood sugar rapidly.
Yeah, absolutely. So in your experience, what do people find most difficult with pregnancy and nutrition, and why?
That's a good question. In what context?
I guess, we've sort of touched on cravings, but also probably the information that's out there, or as you come back to also the mindful eating, and I guess not only what they're eating, but how they're eating. I guess there's so many different theories out there. I should be eating this, and I should be eating at these times, and I guess that most ladies I see are really confused. There's almost like information overload, and trying to, try to basically give them the best and most simple, effective advice.
Right. Yeah, I think for a lot of people, nutritionally, maybe the most challenging part is feeling like you know what you should be eating, but you can't eat it due to nausea and food aversions, which is typically in the first trimester, first half of pregnancy. I think that is very challenging for people to just be okay with not being okay, and to sort of take a step back and be like, my nutrition is not perfect right now. It's all going to be okay. There's even a physiologic basis for like carb cravings in the first trimester. So just sort of trusting that your body has your best interest in mind, even if it doesn't seem to be leading you towards healthier choices. I think that is helpful. I also think one of the challenges is like what you mentioned, sorting through conflicting advice. So should be eating this, should be eating that, should be eating this, and then trying to determine like what is actually like based on science and logic, and what is just an old wives' tale or somebody's opinion, or maybe the advice is really outdated, but like back in the 80s it was good advice. Like, you just kind of don't know. And I feel like during pregnancy you just want to do everything right. You know, we all want to do everything right and have the healthiest baby possible. And it's hard to decide what information to trust or not trust. I mean,
so true.
And food safety advice, for example. I mean, if you don't,
food safety. I mean, that's a whole world of confusion. And then, I mean, and again, that's why I just love this book so much, because you have just spent so much time getting that evidence base. You know, it just all makes sense. And so back on and I think, as you say as well, feeling so tired, so sick, it's quite hard to make, you know you should be eating, but you don't know what to eat. So what are your best tips on relieving nausea?
So First and foremost, I would say small, frequent meals and snacks. Just try to get something in, however small it is. Because there's sort of this cyclical issue with nausea where like if you don't want to eat because you feel nauseous, and then you don't eat and then you feel more nauseous.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of about just finding whatever little thing sort of sounds good at that moment that'll help to settle your stomach, and then just doing that again and again and again and again and again. And then sort of stepping back from the trying to do everything perfect and just trying to do what's going to work for that day. If at all possible, if you can tolerate anything that has a little bit of protein or fat in it, that tends to be much more satiating and much more balancing for your blood sugar levels, so you don't end up in that ridiculously hungry state again. So for example, if like avocado sounds good, or some nuts. Or I mean, oftentimes eggs can be hit or miss with people. Meats are a pretty common aversion in the first trimester. Although I find among vegetarian and vegan women, sometimes they crave it more. So it might just depend on like your nutritional status coming into pregnancy, who knows? But nuts and like cheese, dairy, those seem to be a little more well tolerated. Like I know for me, salted cashews were a go-to when I was super nauseous. And those would kind of get me through. And once you can tolerate something, then maybe you can try, a larger portion of it later on. When it's really, really bad, sometimes you just have to go for straight carbs, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's better to eat than to starve yourself, right? So, if a popsicle made with fruit juice or something, or a smoothie, or rice, or buttered bread, that's a pretty common craving the first trimester. Like if that's the only thing that's going to settle your stomach, you're better off eating something than not eating. But what you may want to try is doing it just in small and more frequent amounts, so that you get you just balance out your blood sugar a little more, instead of having like a massive amount of carbs all at once where your blood sugar spikes and then crashes, leaving you crazy nauseous. You just have a couple bites of toast and then some water, and settle your stomach, and then a couple bites of toast and then maybe some cashews, and you just sort of try to keep on keeping on, because if you overfill your stomach, it can be just as bad as going super hungry. So it's like constantly battling, trying to find this sweet spot week to week. I mean, I had nausea too, so it was just one of those.
Oh, it's
difficult
terrible.
Parts
Yeah,
of pregnancy.
It is. It's one of those. And I think the salted cashews are a fantastic tip. And also, I know I recommend to a lot of my ladies smoothies, because we, living in Australia, well, in Queensland, it's always quite warm, and that's often, with a safe protein powder. Yeah, salty and sour. Good. Yeah.
And then if you throw up, you do want to replenish your electrolytes. There's been some studies that have been done on essential oils. So they found that a combo of lavender and peppermint essential oil, when diffused, is helpful for nausea. Ginger, vitamin B6, magnesium, those are all things that you could consider. There's many different things to try, and sometimes you just have to combine, like just throw all of your tips at it and see what sticks.
And see what works for you. Yeah, that's good advice. So we did touch on mindful eating. So what are your top tips on mindful eating for women during pregnancy?
Mindful eating is kind of it's an ongoing practice. It's something that you don't necessarily perfect. It's just the intention to continuously check in with awareness and without judgment on how your body is feeling before, during, and after eating. And it can be not related to food. We're talking about mindful eating, but mindfulness can be applied to any area of your life. Specifically for eating, though, you're typically checking in with your hunger and fullness cues, any sensations in your stomach or digestive system, how you're responding to smells, texture, and flavors. Like, is that working for your body or not? Are you eating on autopilot, or are you eating because you're actually hungry? Sometimes it's a situational thing. You're around people that are eating something, so you feel like you should also be eating, but maybe you're not hungry, or maybe you want something else. Just sort of owning the fact that you are in control of starting and stopping eating and what you're eating, and sort of taking the food out of the driver's seat. So there's a whole like hunger awareness exercise in the book that I think is a really good place to start if you're new to mindful eating. But overall, the idea is that your body is smarter than you think, and it's smarter than a calculator, and it will help you tell you how much and when and what types of foods you need to eat at any given time. What it does not mean is throwing nutritional common sense out of the window and just being like, well, I'm in the mood for chips and pizza and, ice cream. So that's clearly what my body needs. Like, we also have to understand that there are our like modern processed food environment has literally been engineered to make us overeat and want and crave other foods. So it doesn't mean like you're not listening to nutritional common sense, but even when you do eat some of those foods, it's reminding you to check in with how are you feeling before, during, and after eating those foods. Like, hey, maybe you do have a meal that's, pizza and ice cream and soda. How do you feel after? How are your energy levels? How does your stomach feel? How's your digestion? Do you have dry mouth? Like what's going on in your body? How's your mental state? And oftentimes if we get really tuned into those cues and also have experienced how we feel when we eat healthier foods, your body will sometimes steer you towards wanting healthier foods. I don't know if you've ever gone on a trip or something of not eaten many vegetables and you come back home and you're like, gosh, I really want a salad.
Oh, completely. I know, you're craving.
Yeah, it happens.
Yeah, it's true. And I think it's so important to because as women become so much more in tune with their bodies during pregnancy, I guess so much more aware, and that motherly instinct kicks in. And I think that's also part of it, just listening to what your body wants and what your body needs. Because I often say, well, ladies are exercising, how you feeling? Does that feel right when you're doing it? If it doesn't feel right, don't do it. So it's sort of similar applying to food.
It really is.
And really also, is. I mean,
really
I know
helpful when you're in the nausea phase too.
Yes. And also, I guess when you become a busy mum, I mean, I'm still have to make sure I sit myself down and eat properly, because you get so in the zone of eating on the fly or eating on the eating the kids' leftovers rather than nourishing yourself properly. Yeah. And
it's so true. Mindfulness practice is helpful for virtually everything, but motherhood gets crazy. And even if you're a person who finds comfort in tracking things, you literally won't have the time and bandwidth to track things in mother. Like, you probably won't. You could force it, but would that be a healthy solution to the problem? Also, there's this idea of like, what did we do before we had invented the bomb calorimeter, which is the thing they use to measure calories in food? Like, what did we do before that? What did we do before we had everything in numerical values? Like, you ate to society, and we didn't have, as many health problems and obesity and all of these issues, a couple centuries ago. Our food environment has changed, but it's funny how we've become, more obsessive about some of these things, and then
it's so true. And I love that in the book, how you touch it. And I think you also just have to look at children, and babies that follow their hunger cues. And we lose that, I mean, bang, 5 o'clock, my kids are hungry. That's dinner time. And
they say after like 3 to 5, kids start losing the mindful eating, that sort of intuitive eating that's like built into their DNA, because of their environment. You can prevent them from losing that by, not forcing foods on them, not forcing them to clean their plate, and letting them make choices about, from 2 or 3 options of food to eat. But our food environment really gets us out of sync with mindful eating.
Oh, it does. It's fascinating as well. So I guess I might just touch on a few of the questions I've had from some of our followers. And so I guess one of them was actually, should I be eating for 2, which is often a question. I guess it comes back to a bit of that information overload and those wives' tales. So and I guess if you're feeling nauseous, am I eating enough? So what advice would you give to someone saying, should you actually be eating for two people since you're pregnant?
Yeah. In some senses, yes. And in some senses, no. So the eating for two idea is usually interpreted incorrectly, in my opinion. And most people interpret it as, I need to eat like double portions or double quantities of food in order to supply enough nourishment for me and baby. That's not what it means, because calorie needs don't actually go up by double during pregnancy. They go up by maybe about 300 calories more. So that's like an extra snack. So you don't need double of everything. What does increase dramatically is needs for certain nutrients. So vitamin A, choline, iodine, B12, like a bunch of different nutrients increase a lot during pregnancy. Iron is definitely one of them. And so what I instead like to shift the focus to is increasing the nutrient density of your diet and increasing the quality of your food choices versus quantity.
Yeah. I think that's
and then you're good. So like one researcher has put it, like, you shouldn't eat for 2, you should eat for 1.1.
That's it. And
which is actually
nutrient
mathematically very accurate. So
wow, that's it. Yeah, that's awesome. So I've also got a question here. Do you recommend following macros when breastfeeding?
I mean, yes and no. I have a love-hate relationship with macronutrient tracking, just as I do with calorie counting. In order to do it accurately, you need like a food scale. Like, you need to weigh every single thing that's going in your mouth, and most people just aren't doing it. So our estimates are just estimates. They're best guesses. Depending on the stage you are at during breastfeeding, and how old your infant is, how clingy they are, how often they want to nurse, if you have other kids, so many other factors, you probably won't have the bandwidth to be strictly tracking anything with your food. And I'd say more often than not, where women struggle is not eating enough food or eating frequently enough, because there's so many unknowns with motherhood, and all of your attention goes on your baby. So like, especially when they're really young, you need a lot more you need 500 extra calories a day in approximately the first 6 months of your baby's life to produce breast milk. That's like a lot of extra energy. And combined with people's focus on trying to lose weight really quickly and sort of intentionally trying to restrict food, a lot of women are under eating. So
I agree.
My advice on breastfeeding is like, eat all the time, drink all the time, definitely keep a focus on the quality of foods you're eating, and not get too hung up in the macros. You definitely need, adequate amounts of protein, adequate amounts of fat. Those are very satiating nutrients that don't spike or plummet your blood sugar. So they're very stabilizing. If you're stuck on the couch for like 3 hours nursing a baby who's sleeping on you, and you don't want to dare wake them up and get up and do other things, like, you can avoid a hunger pang by just eating enough, like the breakfast I described at the beginning. Like, if you started your morning with like high protein, high fat, you'll be much more, stable throughout the day. People ask about like restricting carbohydrates. I don't think women need to, necessarily restrict carbohydrates either, but first and foremost, getting adequate amounts of fat and protein, and then all your extra carbs and other things on top of that. It's a matter of eating enough rather than.
I completely agree. I know, even with myself, if I don't have fats and protein, I'm hungry all day. I'm like you. I normally have to have eggs for breakfast.
If I have like cereal or oatmeal or like toast or something, I'm just mentally not stable and clear and kind of a basket case, but B, I'm ravenously hungry, like crazy hungry. So completely. What I remember about breastfeeding was my husband like brought me breakfast a few days postpartum, and it was like a normal breakfast I would have eaten during pregnancy. And I laughed at him, and I was like, I'm going to need like triple or like quadruple that amount of food. That is not enough food. I just remember eating constantly. So always having food available, always having food by me when nursing, and water as well, but just trying to stay nourished. You have to
Yeah.
replenish your body post-pregnancy, and you also expend a lot lot of energy breastfeeding. So
yeah, and it's so important for
don't
that
worry about tracking.
internal. Yeah, I agree. And who has time? Who has time? With a newborn.
Yeah.
Tracking.
Yeah.
But also, I think not only for your breast milk, but also there's so much internal tissue healing that needs those nutrients, doesn't it?
Oh, massive.
Yeah.
Massive amount of tissue remodeling going on. I mean, they say the pelvic floor doesn't return to normal function for a full year postpartum. Mm-hmm. So even if you have like a C-section wound or a perineal tear or something like that, like some of those things like superficially heal, relatively quickly in the first couple weeks or month or maybe 2 months if it's taken a while for you. But like the internal remodeling going on is crazy. You had ligaments that stretched, your skin stretched, your breasts grew, your pelvic floor muscles stretched a bunch. Even if you didn't give birth vaginally, your pelvic floor takes a brunt of just carrying a baby in pregnancy. Yep. All that stuff has to heal. The hormones are just that. All that needs a lot of. All of that is in flux and is slowly and over time rebalancing, even until you nurse and beyond. So we just need to give ourselves so much grace and so much time in that transition.
Yeah, such good advice. I see so many women just limiting themselves, nutritionally, and
yes.
Yeah, and it's tenfold for so many other areas. So I think we've got time for one more question, and that was just your thoughts on a vegan diet while pregnant and breastfeeding.
Yeah. So I have a pretty long section on this in the book because it's a question I get asked frequently, especially when people go through my foods that I recommend during pregnancy, like which foods are most nutrient dense and supply the nutrients that a baby needs, so you can try to get as much through food versus having to rely on supplements. And all of those foods minus vegetables are animal foods. So people are like, what do I do? So there is a long section on that in the book where I go through the specific nutrients that are most commonly lacking if your diet excludes animal foods entirely, and what to do about it. So, you have options. You have, in the instances of some nutrients, you have supplements. So for a vegan diet, some of the things that would be excluded would be vitamin B12 and DHA. Those things are found essentially exclusively in animal foods, with DHA, that's the omega-3 fat that's really important for brain development. That one is found in only animal foods with the exception of algae-based DHA supplements. So I would definitely say get clear on the nutrients that you might be lacking in and which ones you can fill in the blanks with supplements. I definitely recommend a high-quality prenatal. And with potentially higher levels of certain nutrients than what your prenatal would provide. So either a really, really good quality, comprehensive, like higher potency prenatal, and or an additional supplement on the side. So like with vitamin B12, for example, new research has found that the actual needs for this vitamin during pregnancy are triple what our current RDA is. So if your prenatal provides 100% of the RDA, then you're only getting a third of the B12 you need. So if you were eating an omnivorous diet, you would get B12 in animal foods, and you probably meet all the vitamin B12 needs, no problem. But if you're vegan, and unless you were taking like fortified nutritional yeast or some of the other foods that are fortified with B12, then you wouldn't have that buffer, right? So there's just a lot of niggly details to take into consideration. So I focus mostly on those two nutrients, but there's a bunch of others listed out, and some tips for optimizing a plant-based diet if you opt for that.
Yeah, there's just so much information in this book. It's just incredible. So highly recommend it. Well, thanks, Lily. That's just been absolutely wonderful. So where can everyone find you? Where's the best place to find you for further information?
Yeah. So you can find me on my website, lilynicholsrdn.com. You can find information about Real Food for Pregnancy, specifically on the book's website, which is realfoodforpregnancy.com. I do give away the first chapter for free over on that website. So if you just want to get more background on real food, why real food, that explains all of that for you. And it also includes a nutrient comparison between a real food meal plan and the conventional prenatal nutrition guidelines.
That's awesome.
And
I
then
love that.
the nutrient value. So like which one's more nutrient dense, you can probably guess. But for people who want to see it in black and white, I hate numbers, but like sometimes you need numbers to make a point.
No, it's fantastic. That comparison really makes a lot of sense seeing it on paper.
Yeah. And then I'm on all the usual social channels, probably most active on Instagram, and my handle's Lily Nichols RDN.
Yeah, awesome. And we'll put all that in the links underneath. So if anyone needs to contact you. So thank you so much for your time, Lily. And I guess everyone don't forget to get the book, Real Food for Pregnancy. It's absolutely fantastic by Lily. And how long did it actually take you to write the book? Because there's just so much detail with all your, what have you got, 934 sightings in there?
Yeah. Those are the ones that made the cut into the book. So there's several thousand more papers I read through. It was a labor of love. So I started writing this when my son was 10 months old. So I was still in the postpartum phase for sure. Hence why there's like such a long chapter on the fourth trimester because I was in it. And so I'm definitely in the zone. It ended up taking longer than I expected, I think, because of the level of detail that I went into, and then also just backing everything with science. It just takes a lot more time. So I think from start to finish, it was about 15 months or so of writing and editing and re-editing and re-editing and re-editing. The editing process goes on forever. So it was a long haul with a lot of sessions of me writing in like 10 to 15 minute increments because I was nursing my baby the whole time.
That's what you got to do.
Childcare. So it was just surprisingly piecemeal. And then by the time my son was older and getting closer to 2, I had a bit more childcare and a bit more times to have like long swaths of time to review all of this piecemeal stuff and make sense of it and put it into something that was packageable and easy to follow. So
it is. And that's what I was going to say. With all that detail that you've gone into, it is just it's an easy read. It's easy to follow. And it's just such a fantastic book that you can just pick up and put down as you need. I just have it constantly beside my desk because I'm constantly referring to information. It's fantastic. So
yeah.
A
lot of people are telling me they use it as like a reference manual. So I don't know that was the intention when I was writing it, but it just kind of turned into that because I just put in so many little funny factoids. I mean, I go back and read it and I was like, wow, that's a crazy statistic. Cause I can't memorize 934 studies. So a lot of it is there and not like top of mind. And I'll go back and be like, wow, that is a fascinating piece of information. And
yeah, it's absolutely fascinating. It's just fantastic. So thank you so much for taking the time to have a chat to me. It's just incredibly valuable.